Resistance is futile. Welcome. Hit like and subscribe below. I'm going to say all the things I should say last and say them first. Welcome. It is Mysterious Forces Live. It is Saturday, May 4th, 2019. Resistance is futile, my friends. You will like this show whether you like it or not. Wait, does that make any sense? I don't think it does. Scratch that last one. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm going to be dipping into the chat room hardcore tonight because I couldn't last night. And tonight I'm alone, and we're going to do analysis of last night's conversation. It was really interesting. Aron Ra was my guest, and he's a straight-up atheist. And I explained last night that I'm like 75% atheist, but 25% someone who is still hanging on to a set of beliefs or perceptions that aren't scientifically accepted. And KB, whoop, Ray Daw, hello, adversary, question mark. Very cool with your shades. Thanks for being here. I will be taking another look back into the chat room. Thank you all so much. Aron Ra is a really, really smart guy. If you do go check out his YouTube channel and look at some of his videos, the way that guy can lay out information and state a case it's pretty amazing. And you know, I didn't want to ruffle anyone's feathers by bringing an atheist on. I think it's good to have differing points of view. Like I said, I'm like kind of 75% there, but 25%, I guess, for lack of a better term, 25% of my belief system is still hanging on to the woo. And the reason is because I've had some direct experiences. As I've mentioned in previous episodes and on other people's shows, I had a very close encounter Bigfoot sighting when I was a kid. So even though logic and reason works, and even though science is real, you're hearing me and seeing me right now, and we're all interacting in the internet. So let's face it, the lights are on, the computers are working, and science works. We wouldn't even be having this experience at all if science was questionable. But then again, I saw something with my own two eyes. I heard it with my ears. I felt the fear. And atheism asks me to, quote unquote, ignore my lying eyes, ignore my lying ears, ignore my lying brain, ignore my companion that was with me that saw exactly the same thing, who was just as scared. Atheism requires me to either admit that I'm lying about the encounter, which I'm not, but I can't prove it, obviously, or that I misinterpreted something that I saw for real. And I damn well know that I did not misinterpret something that was within 20 feet of me. So that's where the mysterious forces comes in here, my friends. These bits and pieces of intuitive moments, epiphanies, human nature. I've talked to Travis Walton in person. I believe he was really abducted. I just don't think that if you could quantify the totality of UFO reports, paranormal experiences, whatever they may be, if we could somehow quantify them or count them. Of course, there's a certain percentage of liars out there, Corey Good, and there are people telling the truth. And I don't think that throughout all of human history that a certain significant segment of our population has chosen somehow, for some reason, to tell a lie, fabricate a story of the paranormal or of a UFO sighting or something of that ilk. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Of course it happens. There are hoaxes all the time. There's fakery. Harry Houdini was fighting against spiritualism and seances and exposing the charlatans that were part of the spiritualism craze in the 1880s and 1890s, really kind of up until like 1920, even up and through the 20s during that Art Deco movement. The Houdini was huge, and magic and mysticism, and the industrial age was at its infancy point. And so we had an introduction of technology, and that technology, that new world, so to speak, competes with the time and attention of the old world of religion and superstition. And so perhaps all of that coming about was the beginning of the age of modern reason, modern logic. And I don't know if I've ever told this story on the air, but I'll tell it. It's a point of interest. I'll keep it brief. There are more rich details that I could supply for this, but we'll just keep it simple for the sake of our conversation tonight. When my dad passed away, I was living in California, and it was unexpected for me, and I had to come up with the cash for a plane ticket. I had to make funeral arrangements over the phone. I'm an only child. There was no one else to make the funeral arrangements or do anything. It was all me. So I did all that by phone. I made arrangements, but I had to buy a few days' time. So there was a delay. It wasn't the typical, the person passes away, then there's a day where the funeral is planned, and then like the next day traditionally is the viewing, and then the next day is the funeral. So since I was coming from out of town, I wanted to condense all of this stuff. And so the actual funeral wasn't happening until like 5 days after he died, something like that. And I was having him cremated after the viewing and bringing his remains back with me. So this was all one fell swoop, all in one day, viewing, ceremony, and that was it. It was over with. So as if you've ever been immediate family or in that inner circle of someone who's passed away and you're at the funeral home, of course, there's that period of time when they let the immediate family go in and view the body without the rest of the public being there. And we were at that time in this where people had not begun to show up, but I was in the, I don't know what to call that. I don't think it's a chapel, but the room where the viewing takes place. And my dad was very close to his cousin and his wife. And my dad was kind of crazy about Coast to Coast. He would watch that, or listen to it rather, watch it, and talk about it. And my dad was kind of a super straight arrow and a really conservative guy. So to hear him talk about anything weird or paranormal was kind of interesting because it didn't really fit in with the rest of his personality, if you knew him. So anyway, we're in that phase before the public is allowed in. And my dad's cousin and his wife comes in, and she is white as a ghost. She has no color to her face, and she's bawling. And of course, yes, this is a funeral. People cry. But she was shaking, and she came to me with her phone saying my name. And I'm like, what's going on? And she grabs a hold of me, and she said, while we were driving over here to the funeral home, my phone beeped, and a voicemail icon appeared. And this is an older woman who had some little flip phone. But this certainly wasn't an iPhone. And she got the alert that there was a voicemail. And so she went ahead and she listened to the voicemail, and it was a voicemail from my father. And he had been in the hospital and had called her from there prior to his death. But for some reason, this voicemail never made it through to her phone in the like 5 days that had ensued between his passing away and the day of the funeral. Like I said, this was not the typical timeline of events because I was coming from out of town. So, I have to be honest. I have gotten voicemails before, maybe 2 or 3 hours after someone sent it. Like there was some delay. Something caused a delay in the delivery of the voicemail. But I've never, and I'm not saying it's not possible. It most certainly is possible. But for that voicemail to kind of be out there in suspended animation, so to speak, excuse me, for the 5 days, and suddenly make it through to her phone when she's on her way to his funeral. And when she held the phone up and she pushed the button, and I was listening to my dad's voice in the phone, and she was really freaked out by this. So I've got my father's body over here to the right in the casket. I'm looking at this phone, hearing this message, and I can't prove it. I would never, ever be able to prove it. But I damn well know she wasn't lying. I could tell by her emotional response. She was not lying. This really did happen. Could it be a really twisted coincidence? Of course. Logic and reason and intellectual honesty dictates that I must say, yes, it's possible for that to have happened, and this is just a wild coincidence. I think I would be foolish to not keep some space open for that possibility. But intuitively, on a human level, as a person, I damn well know something weird happened. And I'm very agnostic right now. I am not convinced that there is life after death, but I'm also not convinced that there's not. I am truly in this weird agnostic phase, which is new for me, but I don't mind sharing that with me. I think that's part of the magic of this kind of show, that I can share some of what's going on with me internally and this process, and maybe, hopefully provoke some thinking on your part about what you believe. And I think if I even hate to use the term believe in something, because I don't know, it doesn't seem adequate to me. But when you harbor a belief or a perception or have a favorite theory, if it's solid, if it's true, if it's good, it will stand up to scrutiny. It will stand up to critical analysis. And if something you believe does not stand up to critical analysis, then where are we at? Are we in that, for me, 25% of the woo, that human intuition phase, that, how many times have you read a story or heard a story that someone suddenly has a start, or a fear washes over them, or they wake up in the middle of the night out of a dead sleep, afraid, thinking, knowing something's wrong, only to find out that a loved one or dear friend had passed away at that moment, when suddenly there was a disruption in their consciousness or their sleep. I just don't think that all of these people are lying. I don't think people lie about stuff like that for no reason. A certain segment of people, yes, there are charlatans and hoaxers, and there are trolls and everything else. So yes, those people exist. And there are probably some people who have had maybe not full-blown mentally ill as we like to think of it, but maybe like some kind of narcissistic personality disorder or something else that would motivate them to want to draw attention to themselves by telling crazy stories. I can't think of anyone who would do that, Emery Smith. But I saw a Bigfoot. I was within 20 feet of it. I could hear it breathing. I can see it in my mind to this day. It was not a man in a suit. And no primate would ever survive a winter in the Midwest. There was no zoo nearby that a primate had escaped from. So I was not face to face with a primate in the woods. I was not looking at a man in a suit. I was seeing something that I did not understand and did not comprehend. My father's voicemail floats around in the electronic ether for 5 days and just suddenly pops into a phone of a person that's on their way to his funeral. 5 days. I've had profound experiences while experimenting with psychedelics in the past, when I used to do that. And much like Aron Ra was talking about last night, I went through a phase where I was experimenting with astral travel and really wanting to harness that and focused on that. And I went through a Wicca phase, but like I mentioned last night, I could never really bring myself to really believe in a personified deity of any kind. I just couldn't buy that. It just never made sense to me. And I don't want to go into that. I don't want to pick up the whole atheism thing and justify that. But I'm just saying these personal direct experiences, and the reason I value these experiences so much are because they were experienced by me directly. It's not a secondhand story from a friend. It's not somebody's cousin. It's not something I read in a book. It's not some made up shit that came from somewhere else. 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, what the fuck ever. It didn't come from that. These are things I saw myself, heard myself, experienced. My intuition has served me very well on many occasions throughout my life. I couldn't even begin to list the times where I altered my course because of some intuitive impulse, only to find out later that that was exactly the right thing to do. And had I continued on my original course, in whatever the issue was, that it would not have worked out to my benefit the way it did when I used my intuition and altered my course. It's happened countless times. And so even though I firmly believe in the scientific method, I'm a total science geek. These events for me personally are unexplainable. And I think it would be dishonest of me to say, you know what? My dad's voicemail was a weird electronic fluke. I saw a bear in the woods that day, and I was completely mistaken as to what I was seeing and hearing. That my intuition has never served me. And I'm hoping as you're listening to this, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. I'm just laying that out. I'm telling you why. Those are the reasons why. Direct experience, not someone else's story, not a theory, direct experience. So how do we process that? If you have taken psychedelics in the past or entered into some kind of meditative state without drugs or any other mechanical manipulation of your body, if you've had those kinds of profound experiences, you know inherently that they can't be quantified, they can't be proven, and they stand outside of science. We know that. You're smart. If you're watching this show, I'm not talking down to you. You're smart. You know what's going on because you think about this stuff. I think we all do. The people who are serious about these topics, who study this, watch these shows, even if you're just kind of a casual observer, you think about this stuff in your spare time. And I'm just going to take a peek over the chat room because I said I would, and I didn't do a very good job of it last night. Aron is a Bigfoot and confirmed. Adversary, Ray Daw. Satellite Mercy 4, hello. Thank you for being here. Steve Ronan, the professor's in the house. Wow. Brandon Young. Hey, Brandon Young. KB, Funeral Parlor. Yeah. I guess I was talking about the specific room. I think sometimes they do call it a chapel, but I just steered around using some religious terminology. Yes, Professor. Thanks for joining the conversation. Some lagging and buffering occurring occasionally. I can't do anything about that. I've got my computer plugged directly into the modem, so that kind of is what it is. Pat Breeze. Hello. And let's see. I agree, Natasha. I bet most of us here experience something to that degree. That's the professor. Pat Breeze, the first time you go out of body, you realize you're more than physical. And that's something else. I have had an out-of-body experience while conscious. I experienced what I can only interpret to be quantum consciousness. I was in two places at the same time. I was in my body, and I was talking and I was thinking, but a part of my consciousness was also separated from my body and moving independently of my physical body. And yes, I was experimenting with psychedelics at the time, but once again, I'm going to tell you that I just wasn't high. That just wasn't some complicated hallucination because I was high. That was a real experience. That experience helped shape my attitude and helped change my life as well. When I don't want to edge into magic, but I do want to edge into that territory where you have this extraordinary experience. I personally like the term metaphysical, but it seems old hat now, and it seems a little clunky. It has kind of an antiquated sound to it, but I like the term metaphysical because it has the correct properties, meta, and physical. It's kind of super physical, beyond just the physical. And I truly believe that all of these things, ghosts, UFOs, I think one day we'll have a better understanding through science. And I think we are a long way from science knowing everything there is to know about human consciousness. And there was someone in the chat room last night, and I'm not meaning to jump tracks on you. I just want to address it. I don't know how to properly pronounce this person's ID on YouTube. It was Kafei. So, in some stretch, it could be cafe. I doubt it. But coffee or what? I don't know. I have no idea how to really pronounce that. I don't know if it's a real given name or if it's a made up word or something. But I didn't see this question in the chat room, so I wanted to be true to my word. And this person had asked if Aron had ever heard of a perennial philosophy, which basically acknowledges that mystical experiences are the shared experiences underlying all of the major religions. And that was a good question. I can very much imagine how Aron would have answered that when he would have shot that down, because the premise is that religions are legitimate to begin with. And so an unprovable mystical experience, an unquantifiable mystical experience is never going to verify religion. So I'm hoping you guys come up with some questions. If there's something, like I said, I'm paying a lot of attention to the chat room tonight, because I really wanted to last night, but Aron was such an interesting guest, and he was so deep. I really had to hang on his every word, and I just didn't have it in me to split my attention between the live chat and what he was saying. And I would have ended up being rude to someone, mainly my guest. So I had to err on the side of accommodating my guests and not really being able to be fully engaged in the chat room the way I wanted to be. But Steve Ronan says, I'm not scared of dying. Yes, Davey, we're all good. Pat Breeze, I've had a lot of paranormal things happen in my life, but every day I still question life after death. Don't we all, right? I'm 53. I'll be 54 later this year, but I've got this ongoing physical ailment that can be corrected with surgery, but I get really sick from it sometimes. And I've been really sick. Like, I've laid in bed a couple times thinking, is this going to fucking kill me? Is this it? Is this how I'm going to go out, is from this? And it's really not that kind of a disorder. It's just very painful. It's a hiatal hernia. So I experience a lot of gut pain, and especially in those times when you get older and you get sick and you start to think, is this going to be what takes me out? And in the last 3 years, I've lost 2 people who at various times in my life, both those guys were kind of like my best friend. I know that's a bit of a conundrum, but 2 super close friends of mine, they both knew each other, but they died. And having lost recently, recently being this past January and then like a year and a half ago, you start thinking about your own mortality. I mean, then you start to have this realization, like, is this all that life is as you grow older, that you start to see your friends and family drop away? And then is it you next? Are you going to be outliving your peers and your people and end up alone somehow, just by attrition? And I don't know. I think that kind of soul searching is normal and healthy and good, and we all do it. But sometimes I think we do avoid our mortality, acknowledging that we're going to die. I think religion is kind of a balm for that sometimes. I'm not so sure that people would believe in all of the jinky stuff that religion tries to pawn off on them for just convenience sake or to have something to believe in. I think that fear of death is a strong, strong motivator for people. And I'm kind of glad last night that we didn't get a ton of questions for Aron. I almost said Aaron, and that's damn well not how he pronounces his name. It's Aron. And I've watched him and Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews just shred people who come up against the stone cold logic and reason that those guys use. Their kung fu is the best. You can't defeat their logic and reason. They are correct. And so the conundrum is, simultaneously, I've had this set of experiences that logic and reason cannot quantify or measure. So what do we do? What do we do when we have intangible experiences, direct experiences, things that can't be proven with a meter or in a chemical test or measured? What are we left with? Human intuition, direct human experience, all this paranormal stuff. It lies outside of logic and reason. And yet logic and reason is the very intellectual powerhouse of modern civilization, is it not? All of this technology, the lights, the cameras, your computer, your phone, however you're watching this, how you're hearing it, all of this manufactured through the logic and reason and science. And yet we're left with these experiences, flashing lights in the sky, things that appear to be crafts, phone calls from the dead, EVPs, a shadow in the corner, old buildings that have strange phenomena happening that people can't really explain. I don't want to be superstitious. I don't want to be foolish. I don't want to pretend to live in a magical world that isn't magical just to make me feel better about having to live in this world. It's not denial. It's not avoidance. So I'm hoping that you can take this journey with me and we can sort some of this out together. How do we balance out the world of science, logic, and reason with these direct human experiences that we have of the paranormal or the unusual or the unexplainable? How do we process all of that? How do we accept both of those truths to be equally true while simultaneously kind of, in terms of logic and reason, canceling each other out? So the obvious answer is that there's something beyond logic and reason. There is something beyond logic and reason. I may 75% believe that this is it. When you die, lights out, show's over, good night, thanks for coming. Hopefully the people left behind will remember you and maybe toast you once in a while when they're partying or something. But I mean, yeah, in my book, there's about a 75% chance that that's it, that we're just hamburger when we're done. But my up close encounter a delayed voicemail from a dead father, thousands of flashes of intuition and decisions made using intuition that turned out to be correct. Experiencing a state of consciousness, quantum consciousness, in my opinion, where I was simultaneously in two places at the same time. I'm trying to figure out how to sort all this out and rectify that. But I think that's why we're doing this show. That's why we listen to this stuff, right? It's what happens. It's what we get exposed to. And I think that's part of the draw of this. We all know that there's something more beyond this. But we are ill-equipped to be able to properly translate that into a scientific language, or to be able to quantify that in such a way as to provide some kind of proof. But I damn well don't think that the CIA ran remote viewing programs for no reason. I don't think that they were running some kind of psyop thing like, well, we'll let the Russians know that we're running a remote viewing program, so maybe they'll start doing it to compete with us and waste their time and resources. I mean, we're really going to engage in that just to, you know, troll the Soviets and trick them into spending money and time and research and resources on a dead end. Really? Do we really think that? Do we really think that astronaut Edgar Mitchell was a liar when he talked about what he knew about alien species from his involvement in the space program? Sixth man to walk on the moon, if I remember correctly. Buzz Aldrin, he's flaked a couple of times. Gordon Cooper. Gordon Cooper had an incredible story. I don't think Gordon Cooper was a liar. I don't think Travis Walton's a liar. But here we are, stuck with this intellectual, logical conundrum. How to accept this world of science and live in a world of science, but also grapple with this intangible element of consciousness and the unknown. Ray Daw or Gordon Cooper. I see that. Two dead grandmas came to her and told her she would be fine. She just told me this last week. I'm just picking up pieces of the conversation. I don't see any hardcore questions. I'd like to say thank you to Sherry Scoville, who's in the chat room. The professor, as always. Everyone for tuning in. Brandon Young. I want to get my core group of people who are participating in the chat reestablished. I'm done taking my little hiatuses. Some of them were imposed. Some of them were due to illness. Some of them were due to travel, just circumstance. But this show is here. This show isn't going anywhere. And I'm really happy with the success and the progress we're making with this show. And I'm really proud of last night's show. Even if that was somebody that was kind of stripping down, tearing down things that we all love and hold dear, ideas, concepts. Maybe we need an iconoclast to come along every once in a while and challenge our ideas. I think that's healthy. You know, it's like a storm blowing in early spring, late winter that kind of clears out all the dust and all the debris and just blows through, and then the rain washes everything down, and it's kind of like the end of winter and the beginning of a spring, and everything gets refreshed. It's a cycle. And maybe part of this kind of research, this topic, this core of human consciousness, is that not the most mysterious force of all? Boom. You see how I did that? Thank you so much. I'm glad you're here. I'll be back next weekend. I've got guests both nights next week. I'm starting to plan a trip, I guess, to Contact in the Desert. Not so much for the programming, but because Jiggy from Paranormal Hood is going to be there. C.W. Chanter is going to be there. Kelly Farmer is going to be there. And when I think about the possibility of all four of us, plus whoever else we meet up with, all being together in one place, we're probably going to burn that fucking place down. So, Only fun can come out of that. And I think there will be hijinks afoot at Contact in the Desert. Like and subscribe. Hit that like button. Hit the little bell. Hit the alert. Like it. Share it. Love it. Know it. Live it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you. Have a safe weekend, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.